And a 10, Deadpool. Little is known about Deadpool's life before the zombie plague arrived on Earth 2149. At some point though, he was infected and he attacked the Silver Surfer. He most likely fled the attack but also escaped the power cosmic zombies from getting himself incinerated and killed. He later was transported from Earth 2149 to Earth 616, calling himself the Merc with half a mouth due to his lack of most of his jaw, and exhibiting a wide range of knowledge. However, he was torn apart by some blades after Kale put some tricky maneuvers, resulting in Deadpool now reduced to only a head and being contained within armor. He managed to escape from armor headquarters with the help of Simon Garth by using the base teleporters to escape to the bottom of the sea, where Deadpool's head infected all of the menfish. Garth was compelled to travel to the island nation of Tiano in the Caribbean Sea, where he told Black Talon about the zombie plague. But like, look, normal Deadpool is bloodthirsty enough, but a zombie version that gets reduced to only a head and then still keeps going, that's freaking nuts. I'm also gonna not try to hold back my swears because it's Deadpool. It's fucking Deadpool. So sorry, editor, who has to deal with this.
No, it's fine. Fine.
And at 9, Dead Man Wade. Obsessed with feeling pain, Dead Man Wade Wilson became one of Apocalypse's Pale Riders, a team formed by Apocalypse's chief assassins. His teammate Danielle Moonstar took great pleasure in inflicting pain upon him, pretty kinky. But when Apocalypse learned that Nightcrawler was seeking out Avalon, he sent Wade and the other Pale Riders to follow him and destroy the refuge. Along the way, Danielle's torture of Wade annoyed their teammate Damask to the point where she strangled Moonstar to death. Watching that woman get killed unnerved Wayne even further. However, this version of Wade is also in constant pain, and even though he is in constant pain, his healing factor keeps him alive, meaning that he will never truly be free. That is until Nightcrawler teleports his head off of his body, resulting in Wade dying despite being able to regrow limbs to a much easier extent than his 616 version. But hey, what am I gonna do? It's comics. And at 8, Dreadpool. In the reality of Earth 12101, the X-Men brought Deadpool to Dr. Benjamin Brighton in an attempt to cure him of his insanity. Unbeknownst to the X-Men, however, Brighton had in actuality been brainwashing his patients to do his bidding as opposed to curing them. Brighton's treatment failed to brainwash Deadpool and instead destroyed his inner voices, replacing them with a single voice that knew the entire universe was just a lie and encouraged him to kill non-stop. He then killed Dr. Brighton by smashing him into a release form after stating all the form needed was Brighton's stamp of approval. And by stamp he meant his blood. He then killed everyone in the asylum and then blew up the building. In order to end it all, he began killing the rest of the heroes of the world, and he started by going after the Fantastic Four, killing Reed Richards and the Thing first, then proceeding to kill the Human Torch. But Susan Storm caught up to him and blew his head off with a force field. But while she was grieving over the death of her family, Deadpool regenerated his head and killed her. Because of course he did. This version is a maniac, and honestly, I'm here for it. And at 7, Dogpool. Dogpool was once a dog known as Wilson, who was used as an animal test subject for Mascara X, which was intended to be a mascara that continually replenished itself after only one application. Instead, Mascara X disfigured Wilson and gave him the ability to heal from any wound. The lab owners didn't realize that he'd acquired this ability and tossed him in a dumpster. Wilson tore free of the trash bag and wandered around, rejected by all those who saw him, until he threw himself in front of a car. A circus truck saw it happen and stopped for him, and immediately recognized the potential in his regenerative abilities, and he became the circus's starring act. He went from being exploited by makeup companies to exploited by the circus. The death-defying hound, Deadpool. He worked in the circus until the Deadpool of Earth 616 showed up and recruited him for the Deadpool Corps. But a goddamn dog version of Deadpool? Hell yeah, that's horrifying. It's a fucking dog that enjoys killing people from what I saw. And he can't die. Like what the hell do you think? It's gonna be cute? And at 6, Galactapool. Galactapool is a member of the evil Deadpool Corps. He is seen to attack the remaining Deadpool Corps and their allies after they defeat the evil Deadpool Corps that was originally sent to kill them. But he's taken out when Lady Deadpool deliberately crashes the B. Arthur into his head. But let's be honest. Even if he did die, a combination of Galactus and Deadpool is certainly a terrifying concept. Like, if we talk about it, I feel like it's still giving this guy too much power. Like, what sounds even the slightest bit okay about this version of Deadpool? The only reason he isn't higher on this list is because we didn't really get much of an opportunity to see his powers in action. But assuming he had all the powers of Galactus, this is probably the strongest version of Deadpool there is. But this isn't the list of the strongest alternate versions of Deadpool, it's scariest. And while this idea is scary with no real situations to back it up, we don't know if this is a truly scary version in practice. Halfway through, in at number 5, Wolverine Pool. Wade Wilson from Earth TRN 1946 was bonded with adamantium to his skeleton by Weapons Plus, their version of the Weapon X program. He was later recruited by Deadpool for his army. He killed Deadpool Pulp before the arrival of Galactapool. He was attacked by Deadpool with a grenade from which bugs came out of and then ate all of his flesh, leaving behind only a skeleton and claws, which is horrifying. His powers are seemingly the same as Earth 616 Wolverine, but like with Deadpool's body. So I mean, okay, it's weird because he looks like Deadpool, but he is also Wolverine. It's weird, okay? Wolverine Pool's healing factor though is most likely weaker than the 616 version of either Wolverine or Deadpool's healing factor, which makes him less dangerous, but come on. A combination of Wolverine and Deadpool is something that we should all fear, and most likely do fear. I'm surprised Deadpool didn't make this a thing at the end of Deadpool 2 though, when he was correcting everything that he did wrong, including the Green Lantern movie, which was actually Ryan Reynolds, but hey. And at 4, Evil Deadpool. The origins of the being known as Evil Deadpool are actually tied to Ella Whitby, a British psychiatrist obsessed with this superhuman mercenary Deadpool. She collected numerous parts of Deadpool's body that he had lost over the years and kept them in her freezer. When Deadpool found them though, he threw them in a dumpster in disgust, which is weird because I mean you're Deadpool, why are you disgusted? It's your own body, but whatever. The parts eventually thawed out, and since it still had Deadpool's healing factor, they all decided to fuse together into a single person. Evil Deadpool hijacked the private plane of an American businessman and traveled to the United States around the same time the original Deadpool did. And the two crossed paths for the first time after the Evil Deadpool blew up Deadpool's favorite chimichanga joint, and they fought until they ran out of bullets. Both Deadpools agreed for a second round at Canarsie Park though. Their second explosive encounter caught the attention of Captain America, who arrived to the scene after Evil Deadpool had escaped. But yeah, he's the whole reason for like the whole Deadpool core, so pretty fucking scary dude. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, Death Mask. After a revolutionary procedure performed by Reed Richards removed a lethal brain tumor, Wade Wilson became a super genius and used his newfound intellect to erect a criminal empire. Wade began wearing armor styled after Dr. Doom and went by Death Mask. After killing Death Wish, which was Victor Von Doom, who was the Deadpool of this reality that the Deadpool of the mainstream continuity was actually quite fond of, Death Mask decided to take down his alter ego. After being defeated, Death Mask made a contract with Mephisto to unleash monsters to Earth, including the demon Infernal Hulk. Not to mention that he has the powers of Deadpool and Dr. Doom, with an even cooler color scheme than the original Dr. Doom. But ultimately, in at number 2, Venompool. Venompool is an alternate reality version of Deadpool from Earth 90211. He is the combination of Deadpool and the Venom symbiote. Being a part of Earth 90211, he is part of the reality Beyonder loves partying in. A reality that's perpetually stuck in the 1980s in many regards, much like my father. Venompool is the Beyonder's go-to party animal, until the party gets boring for the Beyonder. But Deadpool was actually originally meant to kill Beyonder before discovering how much he liked the partying lifestyle. And once Spider-Man showed up demanding that the Beyonder remove the symbiote, this is when Deadpool becomes Venompool. He's later seen in one of the Evil Deadpool's Evil Deadpool core, and he is presumably killed shortly after this point, but we still don't know. His appearance changed rather drastically in the time between What If Venom possessed Deadpool number 1 and Deadpool kills Deadpool number 2. In his initial appearance, Venompool looked like he was a cross between Venom, Deadpool, and Rick James, and in his recent appearances he looks like Deadpool but with like a Venom mouth and more ripped. And finally, in at number 1, Poison Deadpool. The Poisons are a species of crystalline extraterrestrials spawned by the Poison Queen, originating on Earth 17952. The Poisons spent an unknown amount of time as prey for larger, stronger creatures before discovering that they could assimilate symbiotes and their hosts to become more powerful. While hunting the Venom symbiote, they were discovered by an incarnation of Doctor Strange, who bonded to the symbiote and proceeded to recruit an army of venomized superheroes, anti-heroes, and supervillains from across the multiverse to stop the Poisons. However, the Poisons saw this as an opportunity to swell their ranks, and most of these recruits were either killed or assimilated. When Venompool was summoned to the Earth dealing with these Poisons, he ended up willingly surrendering himself to a group of Poisons, thinking that the host's original personas were not completely extinguished, and banking on his insanity, granting him additional resistance to this process. This theory was proven correct though, as though his body was consumed to create Poison Deadpool, his mind remained intact, and he was able to suppress that of the poison that had consumed him. In its sense, Superior Spider-Man. Superior Spider-Man is actually Otto Octavius, who prior to the Superior Spider-Man storyline had brain swapped with Peter, yet a piece of Peter still remained in his own body and didn't die in Otto's body, which ended up convincing Otto to be a hero, albeit a darker one. This small bit of Peter that was left in his body was also trying to regain control, for obvious reasons, because you know a superhero superhero was piloting his bone mech. This small bit of Peter though was at times able to interfere or even control Otto temporarily. One of these moments came in Superior Spider-Man number 8, where there was a device that was capable of wiping Peter from Otto's brain, but to get the actual item, Otto had to perform surgery on a little girl. However, Peter didn't think that Otto was actually able to do it, so he tries to stop Otto from even performing the surgery, but he also didn't want him to get the thing that would wipe him from his brain. Also, Otto did this surgery while having his Spider-Man mask on and an additional face mask. But either way, this version of Spider-Man was definitely more ruthless and willing to kill, since he was still technically a supervillain. And at 9, Kaine. The clone that would come to be known as Kaine was the Jackal's first attempt at cloning Peter Parker. Initially thought to be a success, Kaine eventually became deformed due to a flaw in the cloning process, and he continued to degenerate, and he was left further deformed and mentally unstable. Aren't we all? The Jackal allowed Kaine to live as like a test subject to see how long he would be able to survive, and it ended up exceeding Jackal's expectations. As a result though, Kaine experienced a strong feeling of rejection that might be kind of like a father-son kind of thing, you know what I mean. Kaine left and realized that the degeneration that had caused his mental state to decline had also amplified his powers that he had genetically kind of inherited from Peter. His strength, speed, stamina, and agility were also comparable to those of Peter, but he also gained precognitive powers as well, which showed him flashes of the future, which seemed to be sort of an amplified spider sense. He also possessed a mark of Kaine, which was a corrosive touch that he used to leave eaten away handprints on victims' faces, which is pretty damn scary if you ask me. Also, if you're enjoying this video and want to see more, be sure you hit that like button and subscribe because it really helps us out against the algorithm almighty. Also, I'm dressed as Spider-Man and talking about Spider-Man, so I feel like that's worth a like. And at 8, Pestilence Spider-Man. When Apocalypse started his plans for world domination, he captured 4 people who he saw as being good enough to be his horsemen and corrupted them. Spider-Man became the horseman known as Pestilence. Pestilence was one of the horsemen that Deadpool, Cannonball, and Siren encountered in their alternate reality search for Cable. And even though Pestilence was accompanied in the fight by Famine and Archangel, all 3 of them were defeated. This version of Peter Parker has the same powers as his 616 counterpart, except this time they've been augmented by Apocalypse when he corrupted them. But I mean, like a Spider-Man who is literally a horseman of the apocalypse and asks people if they will scream while he sucks the marrow from their bones, I think it's safe to say that this guy's pretty damn scary. And he made his first appearance in 2005, which makes this character around the same age that Peter was when he got his powers, which is kind of ironic. He hails from Earth 5701, which is the age of Apocalypse Earth. And at 7, Ghost Spider. Ghost Spider comes from Earth 11638, and in this reality, Peter Parker's Uncle Ben never died, and actually ended up helping Peter to train as a hero with his new spider powers, becoming the Amazing Spider, a famous and popular superhero who also became a rich and successful scientist, having his own company called Parker Technologies. With his resources and motivation from Uncle Ben, the Amazing Spider used transportation technology to bring Spider-Men from other universes to his and absorb their powers to increase his. After bringing the Spider-Man from Earth 616 to his Earth though, and making him believe that he arrived in this universe by accident, the Amazing Spider was weakened by the feedback of the dimensional portal. Eventually, the Amazing Spider was convinced that what he was doing was not in fact heroic and allowed himself to die. But after dying, the Sorcerer Supreme of Dr. Banner, infused Peter's spirit that was trapped in hell with the powers of the damned, causing him to become a form of Ghost Rider, calling himself the Ghost Spider. And honestly, this is one of the baddest spider suits of all time. I love it. If I could figure out a way to cosplay this, I would. And at 6, Zombie Spider-Man. Okay, so technically this is Spider-Man, but it's a zombie version of Spider-Man, but I'm gonna count it anyway, because this is pretty damn messed up, zombie or not. On Earth 2149, an alien plague ends up infecting all superpowered individuals and turns them into zombies. However, it's later revealed that the Necronomicon from the Evil Dead was actually what caused this plague. But after learning that the plague was really bad, since I guess the fact that they were calling it a plague wasn't enough, or the fact that the world had to shut down, so the population wasn't wiped out, Peter ran home to get Aunt May and Mary Jane the hell out of Dodge. But when he got there, we got a good old case of Parker luck, protagonist syndrome. Boom, zombie spider. He ends up becoming a zombie as soon as he gets home and eats the 2 most important women in his life. He also fractured his jaw before becoming a zombie so he could open his mouth more, I guess. Or kind of like man spider it. Yeah, it's not a pretty sight. Like, even by zombie standards, it's whew. Halfway through, and at number 5, Man Spider. Man Spider is the mutated form of Spider-Man, which appeared in both the comics and the 1990s animated series, with his original appearance actually coming from the animated series. In the 90s cartoon, Spider-Man's transformation into the Man Spider was not caused deliberately like it was in the comics, but as a result of his body mutating further from the original spider bite that gave him his powers. After his attempts to ask Professor X and the X-Men for help developing a cure meet with failure, Spider-Man turned to his friend Dr. Mariah Crawford for aid. Unfortunately, his initial attempt to cure himself resulted in him accelerating the actual mutation process and growing 4 new arms. The accelerated mutation subsequently caused him to mutate into the Man Spider after fighting the Punisher and a recently mutated Michael Morbius. The mutated Spider-Man retained some of his memories and his emotional responses to seeing loved ones or people who reminded him of his loved ones but could not communicate with them. Eventually, during the final episode of the storyline called Neurogenic Nightmare, Dr. Connors reprogrammed devices that Vulture was using to absorb youth from other people and caused him to give Peter back his spider powers but not the mutation, resulting in the Vulture mutating into Man Spider, although somehow he had gotten rid of this mutation off screen later in the series. It's also worth noting that the introduction of Man Spider in the comics, which was thanks to this animated series, is actually what introduced the biological web shooters from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man into the comics as well. And at 4, Spider-Carnage. Spider-Carnage is my favorite alternate version of Spider-Man. Also being introduced in the Spider-Man animated series in the 1990s like the Man Spider from last number, this version of Peter Parker shared most of his early life with his superhero counterpart. However, the difference between these two was that Aunt May at some point died as well, being buried next to Uncle Ben. Thanks to some messing around with interdimensional portals by Jonathan Ohm, a version of a Carnage symbiote from another universe sensed this Peter's anger and latched onto him, turning him into the Spider-Carnage, a version of Spider-Man with the Carnage symbiote, if you couldn't tell. A villain set on revenge and the destruction of all realities. Spider-Carnage is one of the coolest iterations of Spider-Man to date in my opinion, and it's part of the reason I love the 90s cartoon so much. I watch it all the way through just so I can see Spider-Carnage at the end. And while there is a version from the comics just called the Spider, which is Spider-Man with the Carnage symbiote, this version wanted to destroy literally everything, so yes please, this is certainly the scarier of the two, just saying. Sorry comic lovers, okay? Look, I like the comics too, but Spider-Carnage is definitely worse than the Spider. Getting close to the end at number 3, Patient Zero Spider-Man. After the Punisher accidentally released Survivor 118, a chemical designed to help people adapt to a post-apocalyptic environment, Spider-Man was the first to show symptoms from it after he ate the rhino during a hockey game. The Fantastic Four subdued him shortly afterwards and put him in a cage for experimentation, but Ben Grimm also succumbed to the plague himself and freed Spider-Man from captivity, though the exact reason why he did that is unknown. As he escapes into the city, he briefly fought Wolverine and the Punisher, but soon the world would start to fall apart, and heroes and villains alike would become cannibals, eventually leaving the Punisher as the only hero left to fight them. A turf war erupted among the emerging tribes of cannibals, due in part to the King of Death's manipulations in an attempt to thin the herd, but Spider-Man, now referred to as Patient Zero, was the most successful, and took control of all of Manhattan for his own tribe, while the others left to stake new lands. They had to conquer other places. Especially given the recent world issues though, I think that this is certainly something that I can say a good majority of people are afraid of. Although I bet that there are some survivors on this earth that say Survivor 118, that the Survivor 118 plague is fake. Calling it. Penultimately, in at number 2, Wolf Spider. At an unknown time in this universe, Wolf Spider gained spider-like powers, but unlike most other realities Peter Parker, he became a villain, remorselessly killing this universe's Miles Morales and everyone who stood for heroism and responsibility. Because, you know, we're bad guys, it's what we do. First appearing in the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon in Season 4, Episode 16, this guy isn't even the villain of just one world. After finding a shard of the Siege Perilous, he traveled through dimensions to find the rest. One of these dimensions was Blood Spider's homeworld, where he allied himself with the Lizard King. After turning almost everyone into vampires, which is weird because I mean it was called the Lizard King, well, wouldn't you want to turn them into lizards, but whatever. He and the Lizard King hatched a plan to block out the sun so that vampires could just roam free on the earth. And this sounds very Dawnguard Volkihar clan to me. Okay, Peter? Like, what you gonna tell me that you need to find Oriel's bow next? And like a daughter of Cold Harbor? I don't know. Skyrim. Wolf Spider, though, was cold and ruthless and obsessed with gathering the shards of Siege Perilous, and seemed to have a grudge against Spider-Man and every Miles Morales. An evil Peter Parker is always a scary thing. And finally, in at number 1, Spider-Man. Peter Parker of Earth 11580 was once a promising young student, invited by Max Modal alongside his best friend Gwen Stacy to tour his Bleeding Edge company at Horizon Labs. One of the experiments the pair observed was a massive colony of spiders that Modell was bombarding with numerous radioactive particles in the name of genetic alteration. Parker, of course, fell into this colony where he seemed to be devoured, but in the process, the spiders became a singular hive mind construct that absorbed Peter's consciousness. So they started masquerading as the man they absorbed. The Hive, calling themselves Spiders-Man, put on the Spider-Man costume and began to fight crime in cruel York. First appearing in Spider-Geddon number 3, I absolutely hate the idea of a whole human being made of spiders, because that's just up. Look, I'm arachnophobic except for the odd time where I need to impress someone, but it's absolutely horrific to think of any being made entirely of spiders, okay? I would actually rather die. Even if this is a good guy. No fucking way am I looking at this man and saying, oh yeah, let's let him help us. No, he can go burn with the rest of the spider species as they fucking should, okay?
Number 10. Dirty Bomb Wolverine. Why does this sound like some sort of sexy nickname for Wolverine? It really is not. Instead, this alternate version of Wolverine is an empty clone that was created in the current Wolverine series and used to basically burn vampires loyal to Dracula from the inside out. This all went down in a battle in the effort of freeing Omega Red from Dracula's hold over him, while also getting back at Drac, who was attempting to get his hands on Wolverine so he could use his blood to allow his own vampire army to walk around during the day, making them obviously much more powerful. Omega Red's plan to stop Dracula was to give him what he wanted, which meant making a clone of Wolverine who was gene edited to have blood that was thick with photonic cells, similar to the ones found in plankton, which produce their own luminescence. Basically, the blood of the Dirty Bomb clone Wolverine then had the opposite effect on the vamps who consumed it, meaning they would be burnt from the inside out as opposed to being able to walk in the day. Having a gene edited clone of Wolverine is a frightening prospect, and a clone who is used simply as a decoy and bomb is pretty morally scary. And then there is the added factor of how it made the vampires feel to learn of it. And I'm sure that they were properly terrified before they were all killed. Minus Dracula, of course, who got away in the end, like he always does. Although the mutants won the battle in issue number 12 of the current Wolverine series, they did not win the war. Still continues with the Vampire Nation. Number 9. Darkclaw. If you find the Batman scary, and I mean, who doesn't? He is often drawn with the intention of looking intimidating and scary enough to strike fear into the hearts of goons and villains all across Gotham. Then take a seat, because Darkclaw is definitely going to spook you a bit here. Darkclaw comes to us from the Amalgam universe, where he was created as a cross between Marvel's Wolverine and DC's Batman, blending together two of the Big Two's most popular and frightening heroic characters. He's got the backstory and fortune of Batman, but still boasts of the adamantium-coated skeleton and healing factor of Wolverine, meaning that Logan Wayne is not an alternate version that you would want to mess with. And all my ghouls out there, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more Wolverine lists, be sure to let us know by clicking that like button and commenting down below. Also, if you click like and if you smash subscribe, you can call me Vampy. Number 8. Phoenix. One of the most terrifying versions of Wolverine in terms of what he could be capable of has to be the Wolverine from the alternate future, where Thor ends up as Allfather and Loki wipes out all of humanity, just to make his brother suffer, of course. In this dystopian future, Wolverine himself ends up being chosen to become the new host for the Phoenix Force after his own death. Phoenix Logan was obviously capable of many different insane feats due to him being imbued with, well, the Phoenix Force, even managing to save Loki from the Celestials. Pretty impressive. However, Phoenix Wolverine would prove to be not quite as scary when facing a future version of Doom, who obliterated him. But Logan, being imbued with the power of the Phoenix Force, meant that he could resurrect, and in order to ensure that Doom would be defeated this time around, he sacrificed himself to empower Allfather Thor's weapon Mjolnir in the continued battle. Also, that would be the one really powerful Mjolnir. It's like Mjolnir with the Phoenix Force. That's crazy. Number 7. Akahiro. Sure, Sure, Daken is a character all his own, but I also counted a clone that was used as a dirty bomb against vampires, so I feel like if I do that, it would be really insulting if we did not talk about Akihiro. Daken was an alternate version of Wolverine during Dark Reign, where Norman Osborn basically took over in the comics, where he forged the organization Hammer and his very own Dark Avengers. The Dark Avengers were made up of former and current villains repurposed and remarketed as Avengers replacements. Osborn actually tried to recruit some of the original Avengers after they'd been disbanded, but of course they pretty much all refused. They were like, we know you're Norman Osborn, so. Daken was recruited to be Dark Wolverine on the team, and while Akihiro might not be quite as villainous in the comics currently, at the time he was still pretty much one of the baddies. Daken is a terrifying alternate because he has less of a moral code than his dad, who already isn't known for his light touch when it comes to dealing with his opponents. Daken, like his father, is also a skilled fighter and assassin who was trained since he was a child to become a killer and a weapon for Romulus to use against Logan. Oh, and if you're not familiar with him, he also has pretty much all the powers of his dad. His claws are just a little bit different. Actually, Daken also has pheromone powers, so he's not really more powerful than his dad in terms of skill, but power set, just saying. Number 6. Wolverine Noir. Jim Logan is one of the noir versions of Wolverine that we see in the Marvel Noirverse. Another shows up in the X-Men Noir series, but with a different backstory and also kind of a different name. He's a bootlegger, but the one we're focusing on here is a detective. Honestly, a lot of the noir versions of heroes are detectives. But back then in the stories, everyone was a detective, so I'm fine with it. Either way, I personally think that narrative fits Wolverine's power set just a little bit better, being a skilled tracker himself. Jim in Wolverine Noir is part of Logan and Logan, a detective agency that boasts that they're the best there is at what we do. The whole look of the series is very creepy, very noir, and it also draws a lot on the backstory of Wolverine given to us in his origin series, where we learn of how he was mistreated as a boy, his relation to Dog, and his childhood love and friend Rose. In this version of the story, Logan's father is a very religious preacher who often forces young Jim to sit and listen to his sermons while he rehearses them. Number 5. Old Man Logan. Definitely one of the scariest alternate versions of Wolverine out there when it comes to the reality in which he resides. Old Man Logan hails from the alternate reality of Earth 807128. In this reality, it was Wolverine himself who was responsible for the death of the X-Men, as he was tricked by Mysterio into slaughtering all of them when the villains took over and ended up finally winning the day. Flash forward to the future, where Wolverine is old and he doesn't go by that codename anymore because, well, it brings back pretty painful memories, which he still is haunted by to this day. Instead, he's simply known as Logan. But even though he tries to stay away from heroics, retiring, and even settling down with a wife and kids, he can't seem to escape his vigilante ways. After his family are killed when he is late to pay forced protection money to the Hulk gang, Logan himself seeks revenge, inevitably and gruesomely freeing pretty much everyone from the villainous nature of deranged Pappy Banner and his inbred family. That Hulk gang. Oh boy. Number 4. Cancerverse Wolverine. We don't know that much about Cancerverse Wolverine, who hails from the Earth of 10011, but we do know, like many others who hail from this reality, Wolverine here is horrifying to behold, and he is part of the X-Men, spelt E-X-Men. In the Cancerverse, death was completely eradicated, which you might think would bring about a sort of paradise in the cosmos, but instead this change had, well, the opposite effect, mutating everything into one big horror show. Turns out death wasn't quite as bad as we all thought, and that life, left unchecked, is actually horrifying. Who would have guessed? Number 3. X-24. In the film Logan, X-24 was an even more deadly clone than X-23. This was a cloned version of Wolverine genetically engineered to be as powerful as Wolverine in his prime, perhaps even more so, and who was much more easy to control and manipulate. Not as free thinking and just more of a straight up berserker. So basically like Wolverine without any of his moral code at all, or any inhibitions. This made X-24 the perfect weapon to be used against Wolverine himself and escapee Laura, aka X-23. It took a lot to take down X-24, and his perceived strength and ruthlessness in the film made him a terrifying nemesis to watch. I don't know about you, but I got so anxious every time he showed up on screen in that initial watch through of Logan. Even when I rewatch it now, I'm like, Logan, no, X-24 is coming for you, run! Number 2. Lord of the Vampires. This alternate version of Wolverine comes to us from the What If series Volume 2 2, issue 24. Here, the fate of the world was forever changed when, during the X-Men's battle with Dracula, Storm ultimately decided to remain with Dracula. This changed the course of history forever, as Wolverine and the other heroes were captured and transformed into vampires themselves. However, Wolverine's willpower proved much too strong for Dracula to tame or control, and so he was challenged and later defeated by Wolverine, who then became the new Lord of the Vampires. What's scarier than a Terminator-style clone version of Wolverine? How about a vampire version of Wolverine who rules over all of the other vampires and can turn anyone into his loyal thrall? Number 1. Zombieverse Wolverine. Actually, I feel a little bad that I put the zombies above the vampires in this list, but here we are. I don't know how, but I almost actually forgot to mention Zombieverse Wolverine on this list. I guess maybe it's just because I'm so fixated on vampires, which I guess makes sense. But it's really shocking considering how emotionally scarring and overall how terrifying I find the Zombieverse in Marvel to be. It's just a real horror show over there. Over on Earth Z or Earth 2149, Wolverine isn't just any old zombie either, but becomes one of the zombie cosmic or zombie galacti, after he and a group of chosen few fight over and successfully devour Galactus's remains. For a long time, this granted zombie Wolverine the power cosmic, so not only was he now a terrifying member of the undead with Wolverine's killer instincts and fighting prowess, but then he also had the power cosmic on top of that. Wow.
Coming in at number 10, we have the bloodthirsty vampire Wolverine. In an alternate universe where vampires have launched an all-out assault on the United States, most of the X-Men are bidden and mind-controlled by the Lord of the Vampires, Dracula. Unfortunately for Dracula, however, Wolverine's healing ability allows him to regain his own mental control despite becoming a vampire, and thus is able to overthrow Dracula and become leader of the vampires. Consumed by a bloodlust that amplifies his already pretty frightening rage, Wolverine and his vampire army are able to wipe out most other superpowered life on the planet, only finally being defeated by the combined forces of Doctor Strange and the Punisher as a vampire hunting combination. Coming in at number 9, we have the evil Iceman hailing from the Age of Apocalypse universe. In a world where Apocalypse has taken over mutant kind and only Magneto and a few X-Men are capable of fighting back, the usually optimistic Bobby Drake was forged into a heartless warrior, giving him much stronger control of his ice powers than other depictions of Iceman, and becoming a living streak of ice that can travel instantaneously through water. This version of Iceman would eventually betray his teammates and ally himself with Dark Beast, and was only eventually able to be defeated by having his head shoved inside of a furnace. Which I guess is one way to kill an ice-based villain, but geez, that's a little bit overkill. Coming in at number 8, we have the brainwashed Wolverine of Earth 14850. At one point in the regular Marvel universe, Wolverine was captured and brainwashed by Hydra in order to assassinate the Avengers, but luckily was able to be deprogrammed before he did any real damage. On this alternate Earth, however, the deprogramming never took place, and Wolverine's killing spree of superpowered heroes was able to last for months. Armed with all of his incredible abilities, absolutely no remorse, and the addition of Hydra-developed teleporting technology that nullified even Wolverine's usual weaknesses, and this was a horrifying enemy that even the Avengers couldn't handle. Coming in at number 7, we have Basilisk, the twisted, mask-wearing variant of Cyclops. On an alternate world where anti-mutant sentiment is somehow even higher than the regular Marvel universe, Scott Summers' backstory is made even more tragic. Killing 7 people, including his own parents when his powers first manifest, Cyclops is locked away in the prison Alcatraz and forced to wear a mask made of ruby quartz to control his laser vision. The evil governor of the prison even goes so far as to mutilate Cyclops and remove his eyelids, making the twisted basilisk mask the only method Scott has to control his deadly abilities. A favor that Cyclops would repay by killing the governor and launching a prison break that would eventually lead him back to this universe's X-Men. Coming in at number 6, we're taking a bit of a break from the comics with the Wolverine symbiote from the video game Spider-Man: Web of Shadows. In this game's story, Wolverine has traveled to New York City to deal with a growing symbiote infestation and even briefly fights Spider-Man when he believes the wall crawler is actually Venom. Unfortunately for Wolverine, he finds himself overwhelmed by actual symbiotes on top of a church and attacks Spider-Man again as the Wolverine symbiote. With all of his usual healing abilities on top of all the usual symbiote enhancements, this version of Wolverine might just be the scariest he's ever been. Coming in at number 5, we have the Ultimate Universe version of Jamie Madrox, aka Multiple Man. Multiple Man's powers have always been a bit overwhelming, with the ability to seemingly create an unlimited amount of duplicates of himself as long as they're generated one at a time. In the Ultimate Universe, however, this power was pushed beyond its limits when Jamie allied himself with the Brotherhood of Mutants and created tens of thousands of bomb-wielding versions of himself with no regard for his own life. While the Ultimatum event featured many shocking moments, few are as existentially disturbing as literal thousands of clones strapping explosives to themselves just to wipe out several superhero bases. Coming in at number 4, we have the possessed Professor X from Earth 6141. During the event known as M-Day, when Scarlet Witch wiped out most of mutant kind, the extremely powerful telepath known as the Shadow King was able to escape the loss of his powers by transferring his mind through the multiverse to the alternate world of Earth 6141, where he was able to successfully possess the mind of this world's Charles Xavier before the X-Men were even formed. Combining both of their telepathic might, this version of Xavier turned all of his students into perfect killing machines and placed them firmly under his psychic control, getting them to kill any superheroes who tried to interfere in the Shadow King's schemes. While eventually defeated by the team known as New Excalibur, this group of Shadow X-Men left their world shaking in terror. Coming in at number 3, we have the vampire variant of Storm, aka Bloodstorm. In an alternate reality where Storm was bitten by Dracula before discovering the X-Men, Storm came to Charles Xavier for help with her condition. Unfortunately, her bloodlust was too strong and she wound up feasting on both the Professor and Beast. Horrified at what she'd done, this version of Storm would eventually try and redeem herself after she found herself as part of an invasion force attacking the main Marvel universe. While she eventually bonded and made amends with the Beast of this dimension, her combination of weather controlling and vampire powers made Bloodstorm one of the more powerful X-Men variants that the regular X-Men have ever had to face. Coming in at number 2, we have one of the most powerful enemies the X-Men have ever seen with Brother Mutant. On Earth 127, a male variant of the Scarlet Witch, known as the Scarlet Warlock, attempted to cast a spell that would transfer Wolverine's adamantium skeleton to Magneto, thus giving Magneto an incredible power boost given his magnetic abilities. However, something with the spell went wrong, and the Scarlet Warlock, Wolverine, Magneto, Quicksilver, and the villain Mesmero were all merged into a singular being known as Brother Mutant. With all 5 of these mutants' powers combined into one villainous figure, Brother Mutant was such a powerful threat that a multiversal team of Wolverines had to be assembled specifically to stop him, just to ensure that all of that power wasn't unleashed on the rest of the Marvel multiverse. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the one and only Magneto from the Ultimate Universe. Unlike a lot of the other entries on this list, this Magneto variant doesn't have any additional powers or physical mutations to make him even more intimidating, but rather is terrifying just because of his sheer willpower. This version of Magneto is much more cynical and dark than the complex figure of the regular Marvel universe, and when he believed his children had been killed by Doctor Doom, Ultimate Magneto was furious enough to begin a global genocide. switching the polarity of Earth's poles with his magnetic powers and beginning the incredibly controversial event known as Ultimatum, this version of Magneto caused the deaths of millions of people and dozens of beloved superheroes, and was only finally able to be stopped when Cyclops put him out of his misery with a laser blast to the head.
Number 10. Reverend Bruce Wayne. Reverend Bruce isn't particularly scary to begin with, but the world he comes from and the fight he fights is definitely scary. This is a version of Batman who isn't just taking up the mantle to fight his parents' killers and rid Gotham of crime, but instead is attempting to fight against a whole political and societal system. In the Elseworlds story Batman Holy Terror, the course of history is changed somewhat so that America is basically still part of the Commonwealth. As such, it turns out that the seemingly random mugging and murder of Bruce's parents was not actually so random, and was actually a government hit that was later made to look like a mugging gone wrong. When Reverend Bruce finds out about this, he dons a demon costume that once belonged to his father Thomas and sets out to investigate. He also goes on to find out about government-run human experiments and an alien whom they captured, raised, and later killed with green rocks when he became too hard to control. Poor would-be Superman. Number 9. Gods and Monsters Batman. This version of Batman is not Bruce Wayne, but is instead Kirk Langstrom. In this reality, there is no Bruce Wayne to take up the mantle, and so Kirk ends up with the name himself. Not because he was inspired by a bat smashing through a window, of course, but because he is kind of actually part vampire bat. Kirk was a brilliant scientist who was working on a cure for lymphoma. He eventually figured out how to create this cure using bat saliva and nanotech to strengthen his experimental treatment. However, while it succeeded in curing his cancer, it also turned Kirk into a pseudo-vampire. While he remains a hero and typically only ingests artificially created plasma or even animals' blood, which can also help him to survive, he has also been known to feed on criminals from time to time. He's like, these criminals, nah, I gotta eat, they kinda deserve it, I'm just gonna eat them. And friends, before we move on to our next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more scary alternate Batman lists, of which, let's be real, there's a lot of scary alternate Batman out there, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Spooky thumbs up, spooky spook. Number 8. DCEU Batman, or Batfleck if you prefer. Ben Affleck's Batman from Batman vs Superman especially is a much darker figure in comparison to the comics, and kind of in comparison to a lot of other Batmen that have been on the big screen. This is a version of the hero who has decided that he is willing to kill when he needs to. All in all, it seems to be implied that the death of Jason Todd is what reshaped Batman's morals here and caused him to readjust his code. Not only does he kill, but he also does something even worse in my opinion, branding some of the worst criminals that he fights against with a literal bat brand. These are the criminals that Batman has deemed to have done something completely unforgivable. And the thing is that people in prison in Gotham also know the significance of the Bat brand, meaning that those who end up with one are basically marked for death. The idea here is that the inmates will carry out the death sentence that Batman has marked them with because they know that whatever this person did, it was one of the worst crimes, otherwise they wouldn't have this brand. So not only is there an extra layer of fear, but this also shows a complete disregard for human life. I mean, at least a disregard for human life when it comes to really terrible criminals. Batman wants these criminals to live in fear, and he doesn't care what happens to them in prison. In fact, he kinda hopes that they end up dead. Number 7. Batman the Silenced. One perfect spine-chilling dark multiverse tale that I have loved, which even comes with its own creepy lullaby, is the Tales from the Dark Multiverse Batman Hush. In this story we get a reimagined narrative where Batman's childhood friend, Thomas Elliot, is the one who ends up messing up Bruce's life. Tommy in his adult years allies himself with many of Gotham's villains and more usually anti-hero types after Bruce Wayne ends up in Arkham Asylum, which also was kind of part of his doing. However, Bruce isn't quite as checked out as he's been pretending to be, and he ends up escaping in order to get revenge and taking up the mantle of Batman the Silenced, an alternate version basically of Hush, and of course an alternate version of Batman. Number 6. Vampire Batman. This alternate version of Batman comes to us from the alternate Earth 43. As his moniker describes, he is a version of Bruce Wayne who transforms into a more literal version of Batman when he becomes a vampire. Batman. Get it? Cause vampire bats. Oddly enough, this is also not the only version of Batman in the multiverse that also happens to be a vampire, as you already know, because we talked about Gods and Monsters Batman as well, who's also a vampire. Despite being a vampire on Earth 43, Bruce still fights on the good side, fighting against his vampiric urges to feed on human blood. At least, initially he fights against them. At one point, Vampire Bats asks Alfred to stake him in order to prevent him from giving in to his bloodlust, after he seemingly killed the Joker by draining him of all of his blood. However, a stake through the heart doesn't actually kill Batman here, but simply leaves him in a coma. Months later, Gotham is in a pretty bad place without Batman's presence, and Alfred is forced to awaken him in hopes that Gotham will once more have a savior. Batman does go about taking out criminals, but in a very vampiric way, creating a bloodbath as his time staked and his bodily decay has resulted in the loss of his sanity. So he's there and he's killing criminals, but he's like killing criminals, and it's like a lot. Number 5. The Merciless. This alternate version of Bruce is one who ends up wielding the power of Ares in the memory of Wonder Woman. Oh yeah, and he's also the one who fought with Diana to the very end against Ares before he inevitably was kind of forced to kill her. Or forced in his eyes, but in our eyes we're like, Bruce, don't do that. Don't do it. This alternate version of Bruce Wayne, aka Batman, hails from the dark multiverse of Earth at -42 and is one of the Batman Who Laughs Dark Knights. To me, he represents Bruce's obsession with power and symbolizes what could very well happen if this was left unchecked. Bruce here loved Diana, but still ended up betraying her because he knew that she would not allow him to keep the power of Ares for himself, and that she would rather destroy such power. So he was like, I gotta hold on to the power because I'm doing great with it, so I guess I gotta kill ya. But also, he wasn't doing that great with it. Spoiler alert. Number 4. The Bruce. This alternate version of Batman comes to us from the reality belonging to Batman I Joker. Here Batman is a tyrant and a symbol who is worshipped as a god. This is not our own Bruce Wayne, by the way, but like a dystopian, almost cyberpunk future version of the character where the people of Gotham see him as their ruler and god. In fact, I don't even know if this guy's name is actually Bruce Wayne or is Bruce at all. I think he's just a person that's elected and like that's the role you play, or that seized power. The people of Gotham worship him and his mission for vengeance. The whole comic is pretty horrifying to read and reveals how even the best of heroic intentions can be perverted over time. Nothing scarier than just humanity and the way that we think things through and can like take a good idea and make it into something a lot more sinister. That's the scariest thing of them all. Well, almost. There's a few more points. Number 3. Murder Machine. Murder Machine is an alternate version of Bruce Wayne who hails from the dark multiverse reality of Earth -44. Here Bruce Wayne turns to his friend and colleague Cyborg for help, building an AI to supplement Alfred after Bruce's longtime friend, butler, and father figure is tragically murdered. However, this AI is programmed to protect Bruce at all costs, which ends up leading the Alfred Protocol, as it's named here, to take over Bruce, replacing his human body with a mechanical, indestructible, and immortal one, turning Bruce into the Murder Machine. The Alfred Protocol, which Bruce is now fully merged with, also takes away Bruce's ability to feel fear or sadness. I think you know where this is going. It's not going to a good place. In the end, it labels everyone a threat to Bruce and helps him to kill all those who could potentially harm him, including the entire Justice League. Pretty bleak stuff. Number 2. Nemesis. Nemesis is probably one of the most brutal Batman alternates we've ever encountered. Probably also because he doesn't even hail from DC Comics himself, but instead is a creation of Mark Millar's, who hails from Icon Comics. Mark Millar doesn't hail from Icon Comics, but this character does. Mark Millar does many things. Well, we do have an elaborate backstory for Nemesis, which involves him also seeking vengeance for the death of his parents, but in a much more twisted way. Since his parents were actually the worst kind of wealthy folks and murderers themselves, it's never really even confirmed that this backstory is the true backstory of Nemesis. In fact, it's even implied in the story that Nemesis could actually be multiple people who just cause mayhem and death and destruction because, well, maybe they just enjoy it? The whole idea of the character and everything that he does is pretty messed up and is quite dark. Nemesis provides a much more villainous take on the idea of vigilantes and how motivation can mess you up, or alternatively, how you really don't even need motivation to become a messed up and brutal vigilante in the first place. Also power. Lots of things about power, because that's how it goes. Number 1. Batman Who Laughs. Obviously one of the darkest and scariest alternate versions of Batman out there has to be the Batman Who Laughs. This version of Batman is actually like an amalgamation of Joker and Batman, but he is ultimately an alternate of Bruce Wayne. because he is Bruce Wayne, so a little more Bruce really than Joker in the end. He used to fight crime as Batman, but one day Joker took things too far and caused Batman to snap. And not just snap internally, but externally as well, when he actually snapped Joker's neck, killing him. Joker released a special brand of Joker venom with his last breath, which Bruce breathed in. Over time, this venom made him paranoid and homicidal, and ultimately, he became the villain of the story, going so far as to kill all the members of the Bat family, knowing they would not be able to join him, or not be willing to join him, I guess I should say. Well, he killed all of them at least except one. His son Damian Wayne was offered a spot at his father's side, and he ended up taking it. Batman then became the insane Batman who laughs and set out to conquer and reshape the entire multiverse. Which definitely means you're pretty scary. If you are like, I'm not just gonna take over this world, I'm gonna like go beyond that, that's a lot.
Starting off our list with an honorable mention at number 10, we have the Black Panther of the Marvel Zombieverse. Now, despite hailing from the universe literally called the Marvel Zombieverse, this incarnation of T'Challa is less scary himself, but more so just horrifying what winds up happening to him. After avoiding the initial outbreak of the zombie virus that managed to take out a large chunk of the world's superhuman population, T'Challa is betrayed by Hank Pym, aka Giant Man, and forced to be preserved as a food source for the former hero so that Hank can continue to focus on his research. Losing both an arm and a leg, T'Challa was only able to escape by teaming up with the zombified head of the Wasp, aka Janet Van Dyne. Coming in at number 9, we have the Black Panther of Earth 2301, aka the Marvel Mangaverse. Now, while usually the only frightening thing about manga is the amount of chapters I have to catch up on, the weirdest part of this section of the Marvel multiverse has got to be its unique take on Black Panther's powers. Rather than science or the heart-shaped herb of Wakanda, this version of T'Challa gets his powers directly from the Egyptian god Horus, and is capable of transforming into a literal Black Panther when he needs to for combat. Weirdly enough, Horus also gifts T'Challa the ability to grow a falcon's wings as well, so he might just have to argue with Sam Wilson about that if he doesn't want to get sued. Coming in at number 8, we have the Black Panther from the Ultimate Marvel Universe. In this slightly darker take on the Marvel Universe, gaining the title of Black Panther required T'Challa to literally defeat a Wakandan Panther in a combat ritual, a task he was able to accomplish, but at the cost of having his throat slashed and severely injured. To save his son, T'Challa's father sent him overseas to be healed in the Weapon X program, the same torturous experiments that resulted in the Wolverine. Thus, this Black Panther has incredible healing abilities and adamantium claws, meaning that along with the vibranium of Wakanda, this version of the hero is wielding both of the most powerful metals in the Marvel Universe. Coming in at number 7, we've got to go with Cole Tiger, the son of T'Challa from the alternate future of the MC2 universe. Named T'Chaka II after his grandfather, Cole Tiger hasn't yet become the king of Wakanda, but that doesn't stop him from fighting for his people. In a twist, T'Chaka's increased strength and speed are only available to him in his panther form, in which he literally transforms into a human-panther hybrid with incredibly deadly claws and fangs. Yeah, the Black Panther suit has always been at least a little bit intimidating, but getting chewed on by a super strong Panther Man seems like a bit more of a handful. Coming in at number 6, we've got Black Panther 2099. In an alternate future, the villainous Dr. Doom has invaded and completely taken over Wakanda, and the only hope lies in the hands of the Resistance and a new man who has taken up the mantle of the Black Panther, Kashamba. Using the powers of the heart-shaped herb, Kashamba at first seems to be a worthy successor to the mantle, with all of the powers that T'Challa had during his time as king. However, the dark twist at the end of this storyline reveals that even in victory, this version of Black Panther is nothing more than a pawn for Victor Von Doom, showing a defeated man sitting on the throne of Wakanda, a very horrifying sight indeed. Coming in at number 5, we've got to go with the Black Panther Panther from Earth X. Another alternate version of the character that's a bit more cat-like than the normally human T'Challa, this version is actually permanently stuck as a Panther-human hybrid, rather than just being an attack form he can change into and out of at will like the Kolp tiger could. After the Terrigen mists began to spread on Earth, many animals within Wakanda also began to grow more human in appearance, leaving the Black Panther as the leader of not only the Wakandan people, but an army of Animen that grew frustrated at their current situation. Definitely one of the weirder takes on a very iconic character. Coming in at number 4, we have the horrifying creature known as the Spider-Virus Panther. During the event called Spider Island, a villain known fittingly enough as the Spider Queen used Peter Parker's DNA to create a virus that would initially just give people additional powers similar to Spider-Man, but would eventually mutate them into horrific half-arachnid, half-human beings. With multiple limbs, eyes, and a thirst for blood, this version of T'Challa with all of the powers of both the Black Panther and Spider-Man in a single terrifying form, this creature prowled the halls of the Museum of Natural History and definitely would be more frightening than anything else you'd find in that building. Coming in at number 3, we've got to go with the mashup hero of Ghost Panther. During the Infinity Warps event, which led to multiple Marvel heroes being combined together in a new universe with half as many inhabitants, Black Panther and Ghost Rider were combined together to become, you guessed it, the Ghost Panther. Adding Hellfire manipulation to Black Panther's power set would be reason enough to be scared of this version of the hero, but combined with a flaming skull head and eternally riding a fiery panther steed, and this is one Black Panther you don't want to mess with. Coming in at number 2, we have Azzuri, the grandfather of the Black Panther. During the era of World War II, Wakanda was still isolated from the rest of the world and protected by Azzuri, a Black Panther with the ability to raise and control the dead like a necromancer. Combined with his talent with the machete-style weapons that left him unafraid to decapitate his foes to send a message, and this version of Black Panther was an intimidating obstacle whenever Captain America briefly showed up on Wakanda's doorstep. And honestly, it's a good thing that Cap was able to keep his head. And coming in with our final slot, we've got to go with the venom-wielding Black Panther of an alternate reality, Ngozi. In a world where the original Black Panther falls in battle against the Rhino while protecting Nigeria, a track student Ngozi bonds with a symbiote in order to protect her friends. Impressing the Wakandan warriors nearby, Ngozi is taken back to their homeland and eventually earns the title of the new Black Panther, but with her own violent symbiote twist. With all the powers of both the heart-shaped herb and the venom symbiote, Ngozi is definitely a foe to fear.